Commanders Nation, welcome back. We are in Indianapolis. The NFL Scouting Combine 2026 is already rolling, and I swear to you, fam, this week feels different. This is not the empty hype from the first days of the offseason. No, this is concrete. This has a name, a last name, and a pick number because Adam Peters just spoke. And when Peters talks at the Combine, that is not dead air. He is filling with empty words. No way. Every sentence that comes out of that mouth has a purpose, it has a direction, and right now, 3 storylines are running the show inside Commanders camp that I need you to understand before everybody starts talking about this tomorrow. First, Peters just went out there and publicly defended one of the most controversial prospects of the 2026 draft class, and the way he did it makes me think Washington already has a specific player in mind. Second, there is an extension negotiation in play that might be the single most important move this team makes all offseason, and it is not the one you think. And third, there is a name floating around in the free agency conversation that has me thinking about some very interesting possibilities for the Commanders' secondary. So shut down TikTok, throw this on full screen, and let us cook. Offseason gets real today. News 1, Adam Peters defends short arms and puts Ruben Bain-Jayer on the radar. Okay, fam, let us start with what everybody is talking about today in Indy. Adam Peters met with the media at the Combine, and somebody asked about the topic that has been stirring up debate in draft circles for weeks. Edge rush prospects with short arms, and Peters, without anybody dropping a specific name, answered in a way that pretty much screamed one last name, Bain. Ruben Bain Jr., listen to what the GM said because these words matter. Peters said straight up that there are several players in this draft with shorter arms who are really good players that he could talk for days about arm length because depending on who's doing the measuring, the number changes, and that at the end of the day, what really matters is how the player uses what is there. That there are guys with short arms who play with crazy extension all the time, and there are guys with long arms who never use them right, that the tape is what rules, that some players can pop with short arms by doing things differently. Bro. When a GM says that at the Combine, I need you to stop for a second and process what just happened. Peters is not answering some abstract question about measurements. Peters is building the public argument that is going to be used to justify a draft pick. He is laying the groundwork. He is educating the fan base. He is sending a signal to the rest of the league. That is high-level front office strategy, and not everybody is reading it that way. Now, let us talk about who Ruben Bain Jr. is for anybody who does not really know the player yet, because this kid just wrapped up a final season at Miami doing things that flat out should not be possible to pull off consistently against Power 5 offenses. 12 sacks, 83 total pressures, a pass rush win rate of 23.5%. That last number is ridiculous. That number puts this player in elite territory for context in the NFL. A pass rusher with a sustained win rate north of 20% is playing at an all-pro level. Bain did that in college on a consistent basis, and on top of that, did it while seeing double and even triple teams because coordinators could not pretend he did not exist anymore. The issue, or what people are calling the issue, is arm length. The numbers floating around draft circles say Bain might come in somewhere between 31 and 32 inches in arm length, which is below the ideal threshold a lot of teams want for a first-round edge rusher. That has pushed some analysts to start sliding him down their boards. Some are even talking about kicking him inside as a defensive tackle. That would be a mistake, and Peters seems to be on that same page. Because look at what is happening in the modern NFL. Defensive schemes have evolved. We are not living in the era where an edge rusher has to be a classic 4-3 defensive end at 6'4", 265 pounds with 34-inch arms. The best coordinators in the league are taking players with outlier profiles and turning them into nightmares for quarterbacks by using motion, versatility, and blocking math. And right now, the Commanders have Durante Jones installed as the new defensive coordinator, coming in with fresh ideas and building out a hybrid 3-4, 4-3 system. In that context, Ruben Bain Jr. is not just a fit. This is an ideal chess piece. Picture this. Durante Jones can line Bain up in the B-gap as an interior rusher on some snaps and then kick him outside on others. Without the offensive lineman across from him being able to lock into just one role to prepare for, that duality is gold in modern football. That is exactly what makes players like Bain such a nightmare to block. This dude does not need to get his hands into the tackle's chest with long arms to win, wins with get off, with sick counter moves, with the ability to redirect in a phone booth. The tape says this player is elite. Peter said the tape is what rules. The conclusion writes itself. Now, the real question is whether Bain is going to be on the board at pick number 7 for the Commanders. That is where it gets tricky. If multiple quarterbacks go early, and that is a very realistic scenario in this draft, then there is a legit path for Bain to slide to Washington. But if the teams that are starving for edge rushers pounce earlier, Peters is going to have to decide whether to move up or pivot to another prospect. That is why what he said today at the Combine is such a big deal. Peters is not sitting back waiting. He is doing positioning work right now, building the public case for the move that is already in the plans. Fam, I have been looking at this draft for a while, and let me say this confidently. If Reuben Bain Jr. is there at Washington's 7th pick, the Commanders have to slam that card in without thinking twice. The arm length debate is never going to fully go away, but Peters just told you what is thought inside the building about that whole conversation. And I am with that. The tape rules. And Bain's tape says this is an elite pressure generator who's going to make life miserable for NFC East quarterbacks from the first day cleats touch grass in Landover. And I need that in my life. We should also mention David Bailey out of Texas Tech, the other big-time name at the edge spot in this draft. Bailey is coming in with equally absurd numbers, including a pass rush pressure rate above 20% in back-to-back seasons, and just led the nation in sacks this year. Both of these guys would be transformational for a defense that finished the 2025 season without anything close to consistent pressure. The thing is, Bain has the higher ceiling as a player in Jones's system, and the public defense Peters put out there at the Combine today suggests Washington already has very strong opinions about how to deploy a player like this. Bottom line here, Adam Peters showed up at the Combine with a message, did not drop the name, but delivered it anyway. The Commanders are looking at the short arm edge rushers in this draft, and they are not sweating what everybody else is hung up on. That is trust in their eval process. And with Jaden Daniels in the quarterback room, Peters knows this pick cannot be wasted. An elite pressure generator next to Dorrance Armstrong Jr. when that knee is right and the player is back on the field could completely flip this team's defensive identity in 2026. We are talking about building the defense Jaden Daniels deserves behind that quarterback. Okay, fam, breathe for a second, because what I just laid out is the biggest move on the board so far this offseason. But there is another story making the rounds today that hits directly at Peters' ability to build that winning roster everybody wants, and it has to do with the person protecting the blind side of the franchise quarterback. News 2. Commanders very motivated to extend Laramie Tunsil. Jaden Daniels' shield on the line. Let us go straight to it, because this one has me a little torn, and I need to keep it honest with you. Nikki Javala reported today that Adam Peters said at the Combine that the Commanders are, quote, very motivated to get an extension done with left tackle Laramie Tunsil. But Peters also said there is no set timetable and that the opening of the new league year on March 11th is not going to act as some artificial deadline for either side. First, let us give some context on who Tunsil is and why this deal matters so much. Laramie Tunsil is 31 years old, former first-rounder in the 2016 draft, 3-time Pro Bowler. Right now, one of the best left tackles available anywhere in the NFL, and is the one blocking Jaden Daniels' blind side. That is not some minor detail. That is the security detail for the most important player this franchise has. Probably the single most important player in the whole NFC East right now. And when I say Tunsil is critical for Jaden Daniels, I mean it. That is not fan hyperbole. That is football talking. Look at the numbers. Tunsil played 14 games and made 14 starts in 2025 for Washington. And even though the team put together a disappointing season, blindside protection was not the main issue. That is a direct reflection of what Tunsil puts on tape week in and week out. This dude lines up across from the best pass rushers in the league and neutralizes them. This is technique, experience, and the football IQ to diagnose blitz packages before they even trigger. That is priceless. when the quarterback is still young and developing instincts against pressure looks. Now here comes the complicated part. Tunsil is heading into the final year of the current deal with a cap number just under $25 million in 2026. That number is not crazy for a left tackle at his level, but the issue for Washington is what happens after this year. Are they going to extend Tunsil beyond 2026 or let the player hit free agency? That answer will define how aggressive Peters can be on other fronts across the roster. And here is the real tension. Washington already sent a second-round pick and a fourth-round pick in the 2026 draft to bring Tunsil in last year. That was a serious price. If Peters now hands out a big extension, we are talking about a total investment in this player that is going to shape the cap for years. That is a huge bet on a tackle who is already 31, stepping into that stage of a career where injuries and decline become real variables. But here is the counter, and listen up because this matters. The alternative to extending Tunsil is letting the contract run out and then trying to find a left tackle at that level, either on the open market or in the draft in 2027. Do you know how hard that is? Extremely hard. Elite tackles are not growing on trees. Every draft has some good tackle prospects, but turning a rookie into a trustworthy blindside protector for a franchise quarterback takes time. Time that Washington does not have if the plan is to actually capitalize on the window Jayden Daniels is opening right now. Think about it this way. Jayden Daniels just put together a historic rookie season. The quarterback window clock is already ticking every year. Without a legit roster around that quarterback is 1 year burned off that window, a transitional year on the offensive line while some rookie tackle learns on the job is not something the Commanders can afford. Peters said neither side wants to drag this out. That is a good sign. When a GM and a player are aligned on wanting to get something done, it usually gets done. The question is the number. Tunsil knows the value. The agent knows the value, and in a market where elite tackles are landing contracts north of $25 million per year, this is going to be an interesting negotiation. My take, Peters has to get this done. This is not optional. Rolling Jayden Daniels out there without that trusted left tackle in a year when the team is pushing hard to get back into the serious conversation is a risk I cannot justify from any angle. Does Tunsil being 31 matter? Yes. Do tackles sometimes age poorly? Yes. Is the deal going to be expensive? Absolutely. But the alternative is worse. A lot worse. What I do like from Peters is not slapping some fake deadline on this. Not letting March 11th force a number that does not sit right. Negotiating from a calm, clear-headed position that plays. Peters showed last year that contract structure is a strength. The question now is whether the front office can land on a number that works for both sides before the offseason pressure really cranks up. There is one more detail to keep in mind. Washington is also looking at possibly cutting Marshawn Lattimore to free up around $18.5 million in cap space. If that move happens and the rest of the roster is handled smartly, Peters could be holding more than $100 million in cap room this offseason. That gives enough flexibility to extend Tunsil without killing the ability to go hunting for an edge rusher and maybe a tight end. The math can work, but it has to be executed in the right order. Fam, bottom line, Tunsil is the quiet priority of this offseason. Everybody is talking about pass rush, and that makes sense. But if this deal does not get done, everything else loses context. Jayden Daniels needs that player in front. Peters knows it, and the fact Peters is already in Indy putting out the very motivated message tells me there is real intent to make this happen. Now we find out if the numbers line up. Bro, okay, 2 huge storylines on the board, but there is one more that is floating around today that you need to be aware of because it hits directly one of the biggest needs on this roster. The secondary, and the name in this conversation is coming out of Pittsburgh. Listen up. News 3, Kyle Duggar and the safety market, who lands in Washington in free agency. Okay, switching gears. Let us talk about a name that is not blasting across the main headlines, but that could end up being exactly the kind of smart, low-risk move Adam Peters has shown a real taste for. Fox Sports dropped its top 100 free agents list for this offseason, And according to that breakdown, the Washington Commanders could be a landing spot for Kyle Duggar, the 29-year-old safety coming off a season with the Pittsburgh Steelers. First, a little background. Duggar ended up in Pittsburgh after the Patriots went into full reset mode on their roster in 2025. The player went from New England to the Steelers, started 9 games, logged 2 interceptions, including 1 pick six, and then exercised an out clause from a 4-year, $58 million deal. In NFL business language, that is a sign that the player was not happy with the situation or that the camp wanted to hit the market again to maximize the next contract. Why Washington? Because that secondary has a real need in the safety room that cannot just be brushed aside. The Commanders are bringing back Mike Sainristil and Trey Amos at corner. That is the solid core of the position. Even if Sainristil's production dipped in 2025, but at safety the outlook is messier. Quan Martin, Jeremy Reeves, and Percy Butler make up the current group, and while a couple of those names bring value, there's no high-impact player who can walk in and immediately flip the dynamic of that secondary. Duggar is a versatile safety at 29 who has shown the ability to play multiple roles, not a top-tier star. That needs to be said clearly. Fox Sports specifically tags the player as a low-risk bounce-back candidate, which is exactly the kind of language that should make sense for what the Commanders ought to be doing at this spot. This is not where you throw $30 million at a name. You want a steady, experienced player who processes concepts fast, understands modern coverages, and can contribute without the entire scheme being built around that one piece. Now, here is something interesting that ties directly into the Commanders' secondary story. There is a name that has been bouncing around internally, and if you checked the Daily Slop yesterday, you know exactly who this is. Tyler Owens, the safety already on the roster, who might be one of the biggest breakout candidates in 2026 under new defensive coordinator Durante Jones. Owens brings athletic numbers that are flat out insane. A 40-yard dash in the low 4.30 range, a vertical jump of 41 inches, best among all safeties, a broad jump of 12 feet and 2 inches, second best mark in the history of the entire NFL scouting combine. This player was clocked as the fastest man at the 2024 Shrine Bowl, hitting 21.55 miles per hour. Bro, 21.55 miles per hour. That is not a safety. That is a missile in shoulder pads. The honest caveat with Owens is that this is still raw, a developmental player in the most literal sense. The tape does not yet match what the stopwatch promises. Needs reps, needs work on angles and reads, needs a coaching staff ready to pour in the one-on-one time that turns an athlete into a Sunday player. That is not plug and play. That is a project. And this is exactly where Durante Jones becomes such a big part of the picture. A modern defensive system that deploys a versatile, twitchy safety that drops that player into coverage, uses disguised blitz looks, leverages raw speed to erase the middle of the field. That is the exact environment where an athlete like Owens can grow into something dangerous. The scheme can provide structure around all that athletic juice while the technical side catches up. So where does Duggar fit in as the veteran presence who stabilizes the room while Owens develops? Duggar can be the reliable starter taking the tough downs, handling the adjustments, setting the tone in the film room, while the coaching staff gives Owens the time needed to turn that athletic profile into real production. That is smart roster building. It is not glamorous. It is not an ESPN front page buzzer, but it is exactly the kind of move that winning teams stack up quietly. We have to stay realistic too. Duggar is not going to fix every problem in the secondary. If Washington expects a low-risk safety like this to be the one piece that transforms the entire defense, disappointment is coming. The real answer in the secondary is going to come from the draft and from the young players already under contract. Duggar is a complement, an experienced depth piece, and in that role, this has real value. We should also point out that the overall free agency landscape in the secondary is not brutal, but it is not loaded either. Kyle Pitts has already been tagged by the Falcons, closing that tight end door. In general, the market is much heavier on middle-tier names than true top-shelf stars. For Washington, that can actually be a plus, because it allows the front office to be selective and avoid overpaying for players whose names are bigger than their current impact. Peters has already shown that this is the kind of GM we're dealing with. patient, disciplined, more interested in real value than marketing value. Fox Sports also notes that out of the top 100 free agents this offseason, 55 of them are defensive players. That lines up perfectly with Washington's priorities, because the team needs upgrades at multiple spots on that side of the ball. Edge rush is the clear number one, secondary is number two, and linebacker is also in the mix, with names like Devin Lloyd out of Jacksonville and Leo Chenal from Kansas City drawing interest as value and high-profile options, respectively. Bottom line on this story, Kyle Duggar is not the sexy name of this offseason. This is not the move that makes anybody jump out of a seat. But if Peters can bring the player in on a reasonable deal and use that veteran as the stabilizing force while Tyler Owens gets built out inside Durante Jones's new scheme, that is exactly the kind of chess move that separates a well-built roster from one that is just built for headlines. Commanders Nation deserves both, and I think Peters is starting to get that. Fam, if you made it all the way to the end, you already know what that means. You are one of us. You are Commanders Nation for real. And today we had 3 stories that paint a very clear picture of where this offseason is pointing. Peters at the Combine standing up for short-arm edge rushers and putting an indirect but obvious target on Reuben Bain Jr., the Tunsil extension, as the single most important quiet decision this front office is going to make over the next few weeks. And the safety market with Kyle Duggar as a low-risk option and Tyler Owens as the athletic wildcard Durante Jones might turn into a weapon. What I see when I put all this together is a GM with a plan. A GM who is not just reacting, not chasing hype, someone making decisions with logic, with a system, with the understanding that Jaden Daniels deserves a roster that actually matches what that quarterback can do. And for this fan base, after everything this franchise has put people through over the years, that is still something that almost feels unreal when you actually see it. But I am seeing it. The NFL Combine still has a few days left. The free agency tampering window opens March 9th. The draft is less than 2 months away, so this is just getting started. We are back tomorrow because this offseason is not going to give you a break. And I am here to make sure you are always one step ahead of everybody else. Bro, if this video gave you something new to think about, you already know the deal. Hit like, hit subscribe, ring that bell. Drop your take down below. Does Peters stick with Bain at 7 or go best player available? Does the Tunsil deal get done before March 11th? Tell me everything. I will see you in the comments, and I will see you tomorrow. HTTR always.